Hello and welcome back to another episode of the DDGeopolitics live stream. I am your host, Sarah, and tonight I am joined by a special co-host, John Jackman from Midwestern Marx Institute. And finally, after I think a year, Garland Nixon, a renowned political analyst and radio talk show host, celebrated for his insightful commentary and humor on national and international issues. Garland, how are you?
Just wonderful.
Good to see you, finally. And John, how are you tonight?
Doing great. We can't complain. It's always weeks are always so fun. So glad to get into it.
We've had a really big end week in political news, especially domestically. So this weekend, the Turning Point USA kind of clashed with the America First movement in a right-winger sort of showdown. What are your did you watch this, Garland, and did you kind of see America First crash the Turning Point USA convention and then get kicked out of their own and just chaos?
Well, to be quite frank, no, I didn't. I was pretty busy this weekend, and I kind of missed out on this. But as you probably know, I cover so much stuff that I didn't really get a chance to get this one. I don't cover as much domestic as possible, but I'm sure you guys are going to fill me in. And I'll be happy to comment.
It's really interesting schism on the right, and I'm sure you have an opinion on it. It's kind of what I've noticed, and even in these smaller kind of political movements, is the Israel dilemma, is what they do with the Israel dilemma. And we've got a bunch that are kind of like veering into a little anti-Semitism, I'll be fair, but we've got a bunch that are like very staunchly anti-Israel, and then we've got the Christian right Zionists. So it's really interesting. So John, what are your thoughts on this kind of weekend and how things have evolved?
Yeah, well, first I want to say that Garland is smart for just being able to tune it out because it is a lot of noise. So props to you. But to kind of break down what's going on here, I think that what we're seeing is a number of impulses, even among the folks on the right and within the Republican Party, that are very anti-war, right? They see all of this military adventurism, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in Israel, and people are kind of starting to catch on. And so what you have with America First, it's led by Nick Fuentes and a couple other prominent folks on the right who are big Twitter accounts and maybe popular on YouTube and a couple of other channels. They're really trying to capture a lot of this discontent when it comes to the war, the lack of focus on fixing our problems here at home. But what they do is kind of channel that, and Sarah alluded to this, into this kind of really hyper fixated mindset when it comes to Jews in the United States and this fixation on race, and kind of trying to bucket these frustrations that we're starting to see boil up within American popular culture and American politics into kind of a package that I think is exactly what many of our political elites actually want. And we're going to get to the David Duke thing. David Duke was someone who showed up at the America First conference to support Nick Fuentes, his own words. And I think, and what the ultimate effect of this is it's really kind of, it invalidates a lot of the genuine and legitimate sentiments that Americans feel when it comes to how their tax dollars are being spent and to the crimes, quite frankly, of our political and ruling elite. But again, it kind of undermines that righteous cause when it's in this package. So I think it works very well in the favor of the establishment and the ruling political interests. Your thoughts?
I was going to say, one of the things I think that is interesting about these times is that ideologically, trying to figure out who is who, trying to put people in boxes. You're a liberal, you're a socialist, you're a this, you're a that, right? And I think what we're finding in these particular times is that those boxes aren't quite as cozy as they once were. One of the things that I think happened in America, my evaluation was this, that the left, which was the traditional left, the kind of socialist left, the trade unionists, the left that saw politics through the lens of economic class, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. You know what I mean? That was it. Economic class. Okay. That left was attacked, pushed underground, shoved aside. Okay. By the powers that be. And then they redefined the left. So now they redefine the left as there's cultural issues. So now you can hate trade unions, you can be against all of the social safety net things, all of the traditional left things, you can be opposed to them, but you could be in favor of certain cultural issues, the LGBTQ issue, various issues like that, right? And now you can say, I'm opposed to everything the traditional left has ever been in favor of, but I will define myself as left because of a few cultural issues. So then that brings out that question. Well, wait a minute, is the left? I've heard people say, well, Joe Biden's the left. He hates labor unions. That ain't much. You know what I mean? I mean, when you look at his policies and they're like, he's a socialist. He's trying to overthrow pretty much every socialist country in the world. But the ruling elite were very successful as redefining the left to the Hollywood definition, right? Which is cultural issues. The ruling elite and see the world and politics, they see them through the lens of economic class, first and foremost. I remember when I was at Fox News, a bunch of rich people literally referred to Donald Trump as a traitor to his class. Traitor to his class, a class traitor. They were talking about economic class. If you and I talk about economic, oh, you're just a commies talk, but they routinely talk about it because they understand that's important in politics. They want us to argue about cultural issues. And I think that's what you're seeing now, because you're seeing people right, left, wherever the hell they are, they're feeling the pain of economic class. This costs too much. Well, you're only going to say that because you're not rich. You got economic class issues. Well, where my money's all going here, but the things I need, my infrastructure, my kids going to school, because your kids aren't going to Andover or the best private schools, right? So I think what we're seeing now is a struggle as to how do people define themselves by the traditional definition, right, left, far right, far left. In fact, the ruling elite, I'll never forget, there was if you look on his Twitter account, in the background, Max Blumenthal. Wikipedia at one time said the gray zone is both a far right and a far left website. Because what they want to say, the mainstream is the ruling elite, the ultra liberal fascists or whatever, the conservative fascists. What they want to say is we're the center, we're the norm. And if you disagree with us, you're extremist. We don't care if we call you far right or right. So for a person who says, I don't want wars to happen, I don't want my money going to, all of these creeps, I don't want the corruption, blah, 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 they're going to label you as an extremist. And they don't care if it's far right or far left extremist. So now, unfortunately, we have working class people fighting with each other over insignificant labels, instead of sitting around saying, what is it that we really need? What is it that we really want? Let's define our problems and figure out how we can fix our problems. And I think that's one of the things that's going on here, a redefinition, a reorganization of class politics and ideological politics. And people are trying to figure out who the hell's who. And it's not easy in these times for people who haven't studied this stuff.
Well, John's part of a think tank that is sort of trying to install class consciousness. So, John, why don't you talk a little bit about that sort of opposite side of the newer up-and-coming political movements?
Yeah, and I think Garland encapsulated the issues just perfectly. We're really trying to fight these narratives of right and left. This whole framing really serves to divide the working class and pit us against each other in terms of where we stand on social issues, right? The things that aren't the bread and butter issues that Americans are experiencing every day. And I think that the ruling class can only succeed in the context of these times where things are getting more expensive, where we're seeing more and more war, and where people just generally feel, my generation, I'm a young attorney, and even with the work that I do, it's still incredibly hard to think about or envision any sort of future. And it's this young generation that, the first in America that expects their living standards in the long run to be less than what their parents were. And so I think that what you have right now is you have this misalignment between the kind of world that the elites paint and the experience of everyday people. And in order to distract us from the reality, they have to elevate these cultural issues. And so I think that this is really where the work of MAGA communism and Midwestern Marx, this notion of American communism comes in, because for so long, and we can get into the history of this, how these different ideas, that radical kind of liberal cultural ideas became associated with communism. That's definitely a long history that we can get into. But at the core of it, what we're trying to do is make people realize that their interests, whether you're MAGA, whether you see yourself as a MAGA conservative, or whether you see yourself as a leftist, that they're fundamentally impulses that are reacting from the same material conditions. And that's really the work that we're trying to do. And I think that another important piece of this is really looking at, who is the revolutionary subject? Who are the people that are really being left behind with this neoliberal economy, with the deindustrialization of America, with this really scam economy that we've seen consume the entire United States? And it's those folks that we've seen who are, the folks that were left behind on the eaves of other major successful revolutions, whether we're thinking about the Bolsheviks and the peasants in Russia, or whether we're thinking about the millions of Chinese on the eve of the Chinese revolution. And this is not to say that we want to, recreate those revolutions exactly, because America is unique. We have our own unique conditions. We're living at a very unique historical moment of time. But what we're seeing is something somewhat similar to what happened back then. That is this real revolutionary consciousness beginning to emerge, specifically among your MAGA conservatives and people who might have traditionally leaned more conservative or been more closely associated with the Republican Party, the folks that live in rural America that have really experienced acute and sharp pain from the deindustrialization policies, the neoliberal reforms, and so on. And so what we have to do, what our task is from there, is to give the struggle that average Americans are feeling a sense of meaning and a sense of direction. Because without that, what will inevitably happen is they'll get captured by a lot of these kind of reactionary tendencies that want to blame this or that group, or get caught up in the culture wars, which are being promoted both from the Democrats and the Republicans to try to kind of stoke people's fears and angers towards one another. And so our mission is really to try to be an antidote to that. And to that end, really, we call ourselves MAGA communists. We use Marxism as a framework for understanding the world, and historical materialism as a philosophical backbone to help guide us in identifying how to bring about that revolutionary struggle that we so desperately need in this country. But really, we're willing to work with anyone. And that's where kind of the MAGA piece comes in. Is, we don't see these people as just inherently lost, or that they will always be reactionaries, or that they're deplorables, to use Hillary Clinton's word to describe Trump voters, but that these people are, many of them coming from a place of real economic grievance, of seeing a country that they believed was something that could be great, no longer looking like that future was possible. So that's a little bit about where we're coming from.
Speaking of MAGA communism, I want Garland's opinion on kind of this shift towards multipolarity on the, I hate to call them the left, but I don't know what to call Jackson and Haas, but Jackson and Tucker kind of opening this door to Russia. Jackson's in Russia right now. Scott Ritter didn't get to go, but we have a bunch of Americans in Russia. What do you make of this, like, kind of this really budding relationship between a lot of our political analysts and alternative news sources and Russia, and kind of the backlash that they're getting in the States?
Well, I think what's happening is this, that as the U.S. empire attacks Russia, like most people are like, yeah, Russia, what it's over there. I don't know what the hell they're doing. They're doing Russian things, right? Eating borscht or something, right? But this has caused people to look more closely. And they look more closely. And I found this, if you inspect most cultures, you'll find something that you like about them. You'll find something impressive about them. You'll find something that you respect about them, right? And so as people look at the Russian culture and understand it a little better, and they're like, wow, there are a lot of really good things and a lot of things wonderful, and I respect them. And that's what it is. People are looking at the Russian culture and they're respecting it. And they're, learning about it. And that's what happens when you start looking at other cultures. I think that's part of it. And meanwhile, I think people are realizing that the system that we have is falling apart. that the system that we're having is collapsing. And a lot of people don't feel it, don't realize it intellectually, but they realize it intuitively. Right. So they couldn't tell you why. They couldn't tell you about the crisis of overproduction and all these. They couldn't tell you about that stuff and the, Lenin's discussion about the state and revolution and what causes. They couldn't tell none of that stuff. They wouldn't know. But they know something's rotten in Denmark and that this isn't working. And they're looking for things. The thing about it is this: the ruling elite, and I think this is important for people like us to try to guide people. The ruling elite wants to point to individuals. They want to point you to people. It's Trump. Well, if we would just replace everybody in Congress, then everything would be fine. We just replace the Congress members. If the problem is that we've got the wrong people managing this system, the system would be fine. And in fact, they've been almost from culturally or almost like they've been taught almost like a religion that the America and capitalism and the form of capitalism, that what we have is great. What we have is the best, to the point where they will look at a country where 87% of the people vote for the president. They love the government. They'll look at China, where over 90% of the people look at the government and say, we approve of what they're doing. They're making our lives literally better. And they will say those countries need to be more like us. At the same time, if you ask them, what do you think about your government? It's crap. Your leaders, they're garbage. The system, but they've been so brainwashed into believing our system's the best that they'll say their system's the best. And they have to feel that, and they have to believe it. It's like, if my system isn't the best, then it's terrible. It's like, I can't evaluate other systems based on how well it works for the people or how stable it is. I have to have this religious cult-like belief that my system is the best and hold on to that. And one of the problems that happens, I think, and you got to watch this, you have people like me, you probably heard the old Malcolm X, where he said, the old field slave sits there, and when the master's house catches on fire, the field slave prays for wind. When the master's house catches on fire, the house slave, who is close, who is benefiting from that hierarchy more, helps the master put the fire out, right? So the revolutionary-minded person says the house is on fire. And we predicted it would be on fire because this is the way, this is what this system does. It burns itself down eventually, right? We know that. We've been telling you it's going to do this, right? And the other guy says, oh no, the system's in trouble. And then they're tempted to try to save the system. They will admit that the system's screwing them, that the system's murderous, going on in the world, that the system is terrible. But they feel like they got to try to save this system, not realizing you can't save the system. We told you, this is what it does. This is the nature of this system. This is the way it works. Sorry, bad news, nothing you can do. But they want to hold on to it. They look back, but 25 years ago, it was fine. If only we could take it back to that. Make America great again. Let's go back to 25, 30, 40 years ago, right? We're going to take you back to the time when jobs were good. But if we were to go back to that time, in reality, they were overthrowing the government of Nicaragua, killing African leaders. At that time, why was the government here successful? Because they were robbing the hell out of people, stealing their bananas, their cacao, their everything they could, right? And if you were to go back to that time, you would only end up here again. That's like the alcoholic whose liver is going and he's dying. You say, what do you want to do? If only I could go back to when I was 30, man, I'd have good times. Would you drink again? Sure. And you'd be right back here with a rotten liver at 50 years old, right? You have to do it differently. And so I think the important thing is to understand is, and to get people to understand is, this is the way the system crashes. Of course, it's going to do that. Do not be tempted to try to save the system. I'll add this. People are like, oh, if the system crashes, we'll all be wandering around like, eating each other like a zombie apocalypse. Well, let's be honest. The British Empire crashed and they survived, didn't they? It contracted. When an empire crashes, an empire can contract and survive. They couldn't spend on all the bases and stuff. The empire contracted. The people were still there. If they hadn't gripped onto this empire and tried to keep being an empire, they'd have been fine. So I think the thing we can say is, let's ride with this collapse of the U.S. empire, and let's let the U.S. empire contract in, so it's not all over the world, doesn't have 850 bases, and now it can't afford that, and it's forced to deal with what's at home. So that's, I think, is my big thing to talk to people, and that is the only thing I will argue is to make America great again implies we're going to go back to a time when things were good, which would only take us here again anyway, would cost the lives of millions of innocent people just like it did, and we'd be in a rotten system that was going downhill fast. We don't want to go back to a system that was corrupt and that was headed straight to hell. We want a different system that worked for everybody. Even that system didn't work for everybody. So that's one of the things I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of respond to the point on MAGA, because I agree completely with you, Garland. And the thing that really struck me about what you said, I've said this before, is, if you looked back at, because there's a lot of liberals and conservatives who will want to look back at Reagan, like, oh, if we could only go back to the Reagan conservatives, then we could go back to the golden age of America. But I tell them the only difference between the Reagan conservatives of the 1980s and the Trump conservatives of today is time. And that's exactly what you said. It's time. It's the logical end of what this system is and what this system can produce. But what I would say is that, to expand on the metaphor of the house burning down, you don't want to save the house. But I think it's also very important for us to imagine a new foundation for that house that is sustainable, that doesn't rely on the far-flung imperialism and exploitation of the peoples all over the world, and that can actually survive and be a competent and productive player in this multipolar world. And I think for that, and the reason why, I think that the phrase MAGA can touch a lot of people, one is because a lot of people who see themselves as MAGA, as I kind of explained before, I think do hit on these real sentiments that people are feeling, recognizing that there's something wrong in Denmark, to use your words. But we also do have revolutionary kernels, right, in this country, and we do have experiences of America that were revolutionary, right? And you could go back to 1776. You could look at the Civil War, Reconstruction. You could look at even more recent history, this civil rights era, so on and so forth. But I think that it is important for us to be able to, while at the same time not going back, figure out how we can draw upon the revolutionary history of this country and sublate. I think that's a good word, that we can sublate the current system. So not save it, but also build something better in its place. Because what a lot of leftists do, and I think it's one of the drawbacks of the kind of current movement on the left, is they'll say, yeah, destroy the system, America, they'll spell America with 3 Ks and do all that kind of thing. And what that does, or at least I found, is that a lot of American people will recoil at that and say, you're just like an anarchist. You just want to burn the house down, and yet we're still in the house. Like, are you not concerned about us? So I do think we need to kind of speak to that concern as well. So I just wanted to mention that to address your points, although I completely agree with everything else.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I had a discussion with one of the groups, I think Revolutionary Black Network, I believe. And what we did, one of the discussions that we had was about, they were saying this, that it was defund the police. And I was saying, no, you don't want to go with that.
Right.
And the reason that, and I said, what you're saying, I agree with. And that is, we should take it's the same as the Pentagon. Rather than using everything in the war machine, we should use it to send people to college and teach them, community college, and teach them how to make it, do the things we need to do to give people skills and help people jobs. Okay, instead of using it for violence. Same with police. Poor communities, we can do things in poor communities that will help the people come out of their situation, which will lower crime, things of that nature. I said, but just like you said, I said, the problem is defund the police. That's going to make people recoil, especially older people, because they will naturally hear, wow, no money whatsoever for the police. There's no police. Because, and what I said was this, I said, that's not the language of socialism. That's the language of anarchism. That's the language of anarchism. The anarchism, that's the language of extreme, say, libertarianism. We don't want any police. We don't want anything. We just want everybody to run around and do whatever they want to. So your actual policy is not a policy of anarchism, but your language is the language of anarchism. And I understand what you're saying, because it's very important to understand the language that you're using when you're communicating with people. That it is critical, because if people recoil, they may want what you have. They may want to hear what you have to say, but they just, what there comes into their ears scares them. And they're like, I don't know if I like that. They don't like what they hear, but they would like what they'd be getting out of it. So anytime someone has the conversation about how important it is to communicate your message to people, I'm 100% there. I also think you have to be careful about this too. You got to be very, very careful about people who want to, not about going backwards. We want to go back to a time when things were wonderful, because I don't know if you've ever, there's a book called Simulacra and Simulacrum. And what they talk about is this. A person who says, yeah, when I know someone that did this, when I retire, I'm going to go back to the town that I grew up in. It was such a wonderful town. They retired, they went back, they're like, my God, that's nothing like I remember, right? When you're trying to recreate something, you're not going to recreate that. You're going to recreate something totally different. And you're going to recreate what your memory of that thing is. And you may be able to try to recreate, but more often than not, you're trying to recreate something that never existed. So I think the issue you have to be careful with, let's go back to a time when blah, blah, blah. I'm more of the visionary. The visionary says, this is what we can have. And this is how we can have it. And this is what everybody needs. And this is what you need. This is what, let's do this. So I'm very wary of that, because the most radical policies are the ones that try to go backwards. To go forward is not all that radical policies. To go forward, all you got to do is figure out what people need and how they need it and what they want and what they want the government to ultimately to produce. I want the government to look out for me, not for the billionaires. Okay, we can talk about that, right? But if you're trying to go backwards, you got 10,000 people, and everyone has a little bit of a different idea about how great it was back then, or what it was like back then, right? And it takes, so people want these really over-the-top policies to try to recreate something. And you don't need these really crazy over-the-top policies for a vision to go forward. All you need to do, here's what I believe. You give people a vision. This is what we're trying to create. If people buy into the vision, they'll go along with the details. If they actually say, wow, you mean I can get that? We can have that. That's what I want. I don't like what I have. I want that vision that you're giving me. Yeah. Then they're more likely to say, well, how would we get there? I'm glad you asked, right? Boom. Now they're willing to work with you. You give them the vision first. So I think that's why I'm more of the visionary. This is what we want. We can discuss the past. Certainly, I think it's important to talk about future. I mean, the past, to give us a context to go forward. But that's why I don't. Now, let me say this. I don't say, oh, I'm downing the MAGA people. No. Here's how I see the MAGA people, the same way I see as everybody else through economic class. What are the MAGA people? They're people that's been beat up by the system. They're people that's been lied to, hoodwinked, bamboozled. They're looking around and they're like, why? I thought life was going to be better and it's getting worse. That's who they are. And then people hate them. They don't have the answers, but they think they do, or what everybody thinks. We can think we've got them. So I think that if I just view, we can call them anything we want, MAGA, SMAGA, whatever. They're just working class schmucks, and they want a better life for them and their families. We see them through that, and we talk to them as working class people, and we care about them as working. You know, I saw Bernie Sanders, which I could gripe about Bernie all day, but I'll never forget, this is critical. He went to a red West Virginia Trump area, and he talked to these people, and he said, you know, you need healthcare, you need this and that. They gave him a standing ovation. Why? Because he said what they wanted to hear. They're like, whoever this old Jewish socialist guy is, sounds good. Again, you know who Bernie is. But I'm just saying, again, what does it show? He gave people a vision. He spoke to their needs. He touched them. And they were, at that point, they weren't, he's a socialist. I don't want your stupid socialist policies. It was, yeah, I need health care. Yeah, I need better school. Yeah. Well, okay. I don't really need to know the details. Let's go in that direction. I think that's the way to do things, in my opinion.
Well, speaking of Red Scares, reactionaries, and revolutions, we had a big event in the last couple of days. Putin visits DPRK. Let's take a look. First, let's talk about how excited Kim was to see Putin at 3 a.m. at Pyongyang Airport. But I think that's the most I've seen of footage inside of North Korea, the DPRK, from an outside news source. What do you make of this visit and kind of the cope in the West, Garland?
One of the things, what's interesting, if you look in what we'll call the global South, the world that's been attacked by U.S. imperialism, Vladimir Putin's kind of a superhero to these people. You look what happened when he goes to the Middle East, and they're like, flying colors over, camels, pulling carts, all this kind of stuff. When he comes in, he is a superhero to these people. And why? Because he stood up to imperialism, because he fought back against imperialism, because he refused to accept the domination of imperialism. So they literally love Vladimir Putin and what he stands for. He stands for freedom for them. From freedom from oppression of imperialism. And so when he comes there, that's like somebody is going to come to help free us from the chains of imperialism. And so he represents something, I think, to the third world. And also, here's the other thing, and that's why I think some of the people here are attracted to Russia, because it works. You're looking at a society that's fundamentally broken, right? And they're looking, it's culturally broken. You got, they're putting out movies now and people are like, what the hell? Nobody wants to watch this movie. And then they attack everybody that doesn't want to watch the movie. Well, you people are a bunch of misogynists, homophobes, and sexists. Who? The audience that would normally come to this movie, but they won't come to it now. They're screwed up, right? So we've got some cultural weird mismatches going on where the ruling elite have decided that their culture is going to dominate, and anybody that doesn't buy into it, they hate. We've got massive corruption. Everything's going in the wrong way. And I think a lot of people look at Russia and they say, it works. Their stuff works. Their politics seems to work. It's not perfect, but it seems to be going in the right direction. And I think at a time when the West is in, the CTD, as George Carlin would say, circling the drain, people look at a society that works, a leader that's beloved by his people, who seems to be an intelligent person who can, Joe Biden, really. So I think that Russia's attracted to people, that Vladimir Putin, to be quite, he's a superhero to people who have been oppressed by imperialism, and they are happy. I think the North Korean people feel like they've just been freed, and they're probably right. They feel like they've been freed, and they're probably right. It's a turning point for North Korea, and it's a turning point for Asia. It's going to make it much more difficult for the U.S. empire to go we'll attack Russia or China or North Korea. Well, now you attack one of them, you got World War III on your hands. So you have to think twice now. No, you got to think 10 times before. There's no, we're going to start a war with this country. It's either we start World War III or we don't. And so I think that they know now that the North Korean people are feeling now the U.S. ain't going to attack us anymore. They're not. They're going to have to turn the volume down on this. So it's a great time for North Korea, and people can start to learn about North Korea without the without the narrative by the West that their leader is a crazy person and they're all, what do you know? There was color there. North Korea is so
That's what I
evil.
say.
The
Literally
only thing they ever
two
get is
colors.
gray, black and white. Not even black. They don't even get black and white. They get like weird shades of gray
Yes.
for North Korea. There was actually color there. Imagine that. There's people that have various colors, bright colors at that.
John, what did you think about Putin's visit to the DPRK and the renewal of the strategic partnership? Just like Garland mentioned, if somebody does attack DPRK now, Putin will attack. Putin will declare war on whomever does. And then he reiterated that when he visited Vietnam.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was amazing to see. Honestly, it warmed my heart to be quite honest with you. I mean, you think about North Korea, and this is a country that, after World War II, this was really where world imperialism and US imperialism came into its stride, right? With far-flung military bases all over the world, the unilateral interventions, and Korea and the Democratic People's Republic, the brave people of North Korea were basically leveled to the ground. Yet they still kept fighting, and of course, famously came to a stalemate. But in the 70 years following, I mean, they were more or less totally isolated. They had to experience decades of the most severe sanctions anywhere in the world by the strongest economy anywhere in the world, and they've been able to weather all of that. And I think that what Garland brought up was a good point, that I think this will allow a lens into North Korea for the first time in quite a long time, that will show that they are a country that's continuing to develop, and that you can't really square the Western propaganda with the reality that we're seeing. Because how could a country that was so backward survive under this sanctions regime for such a long time, continue to develop such high-tech weaponry and technology, and also build new buildings? You look at Korea and some of the footage that came out. I mean, they're actually building houses for people to live in, right? Meanwhile, in the United States, our citizens are seeing their housing costs go up and our government be totally ineffective, unable to build basic infrastructure. So there's that element of it. And then I think that the other point, which Garland touched on too, is just how much it means for the anti-imperialist world, and that this is a moment for us to really remind people, especially here in the United States, and especially some of these people on the left who might sympathize with Palestine or even the DPRK, but also think that China or Russia are somehow evil, or that Russia's military operation in Ukraine was somehow unprovoked. But the reality is, and we're seeing this more and more concretely every day, that Russia, especially, and China are really the material basis for these struggles for sovereignty and national liberation. And just thinking about Palestine, right, and how all of this is interconnected, where Russia really is a firm partner of countries like Iran, which actually provide the basis for the Palestinian resistance and the axis of resistance in the first place. And so you're starting to see these interests coalesce, and the real kind of material reality of the multipolar world begin to emerge. And when you get events like this, it's like the actual visualization of it, and the red carpet was massive, by the way. You could tell the level of relations just by how big that red carpet was. And then it was really funny just to see the West's reaction to it too, because they're always looking to find the little pieces where they can kind of pull these countries apart, anything that they can grab onto. And I saw some Western channels say that, oh, look, did you see the awkward moment when Kim and Putin were trying to tell the other to get into the automobile, into the limo first, which they were clearly just both enjoying. So anyways, yeah, it was a great moment. But yeah, interested to get your thoughts too, Sarah. And yeah, it was a important moment, I think.
I would totally agree. These sort of like glimpses of hope. I try to like really harp on them. So I'm glad that we took the moment to talk about how it shows multipolarity. This is part of the decolonization process. I think that people think of decolonization like we're going to like take all the Native Americans out of the reservations and give them all the land, but they don't understand what real imperialism actually is. And so like these events in West Africa, that's a huge part of decolonialization and the shift into multipolarity. even the fact that October 7th happened is a shift into multipolarity. Now we have these visits of Putin to Southeast Asia. Malaysia is considering joining or putting the processes to join BRICS. Serbia, like we have all of these things. We had, just like you said, it's like seeing your two favorite artists come together and make a song. Like when G went to Serbia, I was like, I think I cried for like an hour. I was just so excited for Serbia. And this is that for the DPRK. I feel like this might give the DPRK a little bit more confidence to open up. I knew people that were there, Westerners that went with they weren't from Western news sources, but they were Westerners, and they went there to document the thing. So this is good for North Korea. It puts them on brings them up. They've given 5 million shells to Russia. They're in the game. They're part of this axis of, we'll call it the axis of evil, but the axis of resistance or multiple, whatever you want to call it. And they are stepping up and they're coming into their own. And I think that, I think that Russia just had to be like, yeah, go ahead. Like not that we got your back, like militarily, but like everybody can go, like, go. Like, so it's really exciting to see. It's the first time in 24 years. And for those that might not know, the DPRK has had a historically incredibly close relationship with the Soviet Union, and they were very strict Stalinists. So there's a lot of that there as well. But we did talk a little bit about Russia, Ukraine. So what about this sort of, since we don't have much time left with Garland, this sort of peace plan that Putin threw out? But I think what's more interesting is the peace summit that followed that with Zelensky and a company. So Zelensky had a peace summit in Switzerland, which I believe China didn't show up to, and Russia wasn't invited. So what do you... I don't really know what to make of this sort of like peace summit. What are we doing with Ukraine at this point?
I would say this, number one, I wouldn't even call it a summit. It was an attempt to legitimize the Western position in Ukraine, an attempt to legitimize their narrative. They see their narrative getting weaker. I don't think when they initially planned the summit that it was a plan, to save their narrative, but I think they realized things aren't going well. So they're going to bring these countries together. They're going to talk. They're going to legitimize their narrative. They're going to bring some people on board. I think that there was a brilliant strategical move by the Russians just before to yank the rug out from under the summit the day before, because part of the narrative is the Russians are unreasonable. The Russians, they're just angry, violent Russians. They just want to attack everybody. They want to end up at the English Channel and take us all out and blah, blah, blah. So the argument was the Russians are unreasonable. They yanked the rug out of that. The day before, they said, look, we want peace. Here you go. Here's some, here's an offer. Now, they knew, as what we all did, that the West wouldn't take it, but I don't think they made the offer for the West to take. I think they felt there was a 0.001% chance, but I think they knew that, number one, they needed to do that to legitimize themselves as partners for peace going into the summit, to change the conversation at the summit, so what they did with that offer is they took the summit. They took the conversation at the summit now. Now the summit had to be, the discussion had to be different, because it went to people there saying, well, we got a peace offer. What are we going to do? And at the end of the summit, one of the things that was said was, well, the next summit, we got to have the Russians there. Now, I don't believe that either. I think they were forced to say that because the Russians made an offer, and the Russians came across as reasonable partners for a diplomatic resolution. So they couldn't walk away with the summit without equaling the Russians and saying, yes, we're reasonable partners for a diplomatic resolution too. In fact, the next summit, we'll probably talk with the Russians. Yeah, we got to have the Russians there. Sure, they're not, which means they're not going to schedule another summit. Clearly, that means there's no more summits, because they've just said they got to have the Russians there. They ain't having another summit. This is not what this is about. This is not about Ukraine. We always have to keep in mind, it is the Ukraine project. This is a tactic. That people say they're tactical but not strategic in Ukraine. No, because Ukraine is a tactic. The strategy is world domination. The tactic is we take Ukraine, we use that as a political and military tool to weaken Russia. Then we go after China as part of our strategy of world domination. So right now, they're like, okay, well, Ukraine's not going to win, probably wasn't going to win. We'll just keep taking this sharp object and keep poking at Russia with it. That's all we can do. We still got this sharp object. Let's just keep poking Russia, and maybe we can do some damage if we poke them enough with this sharp object. There's Ukrainians left. They said, fight to the last Ukrainian. There's Ukrainians left. Why would you stop fighting as long as you got some Ukrainians left? You told us from the beginning what the plan was. What part of when we run out of Ukrainians, we'll stop using Ukraine? Didn't people understand? So that's where they are. I do think, I got to add this. One of to connect the North Korea agreement, it demonstrates that the Russians have said, look, there ain't no hope for peace or whatever with these people. They're nuts. So here's what we got to do. Let's start building our anti-imperialist network, both economic and military. They were building a network, a resistance network, diplomatically and economically. They've been doing that, BRICS, SCO, etc. Right now, they're saying, well, look, these people are idiots. They don't have enough sense to know that they can't even win these next wars that they're trying to start. So we got to preempt them. We'll build an a military network powerful enough to deter them from attacking any of us. And so I think that is what we're seeing, a change where the Russians, and this move was discussed with the Iranians and the Chinese in detail. They didn't just wake up one day and do it without talking. It's in China's backyard. They talked to China about it. So I think you're probably going to see the movement towards building a military anti-imperialist defensive network that's really, really strong, particularly in the places where the U.S. wants to attack as a feature of deterrence.
Before you have, because I do know you only have about 5 minutes left, I want to get your thoughts on the upcoming election and Joe Biden's sort of decline. We have a video, and I'll show it after you have to go because we're on limited time, so our audience can see the amazing Joe Biden over the last 2 weeks. But we're seeing a sort of rapid decline. We're really not seeing any campaigning on either side. There's no debates, no nothing. What is going on with this election? What's your predictions? Like, where are we at?
Well, okay, let's not forget something. This isn't the first president we've had in the same situation. Ronald Reagan was in the same situation the second 4 years, and George H.W. Bush directed the machine, right? So let's not get caught up in decisions that Joe Biden was making and how it affects the machine. The machine's doing what it's going to do regardless of what position he's in. The question is, I think, how does the Democratic Party deal with the dilemma that they're in? This guy's supposed to do a debate next week. He ain't in a good situation. He ain't in a good position to do that debate. They've got an upcoming a convention, and I don't know what they're going to do there, because let's face it, the people in their own party hates them. The bottom line is this: the machine this thing is coming unraveled. If you look at the Republicans, the Republican Party in general, they like Trump. They don't like their party. Ask them if they like Mitch McConnell and the leaders of their party. They hate him. They like Trump because I'm not saying he is or isn't, but I'll put it this way. They love Trump because he isn't part of the machine. They hate the machine. Everybody hates the machine now, maybe for different reasons, but they hate the machine, and they see Trump as something different from the machine. Not that he is, but that's where we are right now. We're in the same place that the Brits are in, except they don't have a Trump kind of figure to at least give the illusion that they have somebody that could be a leader of one of the parties that would push back against the machine.
Well, they have George Galloway. So
yeah, but I mean, he's not leading like Trump is leading contender right now. But the Democrats are in a jam. I think they don't know how. I personally think people are like, they've got this brilliant strategy, and they're going to change him from in the convention. And I don't think they have a brilliant strategy. Based on what I've seen lately, they ain't brilliant. I think they're caught, and they've got Biden, and they don't know what to do, and they're just trying to ride it out. And we will see next week in the debate how much drugs they can pump them up with, if they can keep him going. But I don't know. This guy's done. He's wandering around, like a zombie.
Yeah, they're going to need some powerful stimulants for sure. But Garland, I'm also curious. Say Trump does end up securing the presidency. What are your expectations for those next 4 years, and what do you kind of see? What's your assessment of kind of the political movement that Trump himself will bring? Will it just be kind of more of the same, or how do you see that going?
Well, part of it has to be who wins the House and the Senate. if the Democrats win, the Senate or House or whatever, nonstop lawfare, you know what they're going to do. They'll investigate Trump nonstop. They'll try to impeach. So if they get the House and or the Senate, which it probably ain't looking good for them, their party is their constituents are not happy. So, but I don't see. I don't know. I don't see Trump being able to, change this massive machine and system, nor do I see him inclined to. Here's the thing about Donald Trump. He's just a different kind of imperialist, right? So Joe Biden and these guys, they want to attack the big. They want to go after China and Russia. Nah, they're too big. Trump wants to go after the little. He wants to beat up on Cuba or Venezuela. That's the only difference. He wants to go after the little countries. They want to go after the big ones. So all he's going to do is turn down the volume and say, let's make peace with Russia and China. But now Cuba and Venezuela and these small countries, Iran, let's go give them hell. Oh, you must be. I think she's muted.
We're in a lose-lose situation. I guess we all lose in the end for the upcoming election.
Again, because it's systemic. Trump better watch it. If he picks, like he said, he's thinking about Tom Cotton or one of these other neocons. If he does, he won't live a week. Let's face it. If he gets the guy that they want to be president, I wouldn't want to be Trump. Don't get in any small airplanes or go in any open limousines near Dallas, Donald Trump. Because if you get the guy that they want, just saying,
that's my home city.
Gosh.
You gotta throw Dallas in there.
Take it from Joe Biden. Take a page out of Joe Biden's. Kamala Harris is the best insurance policy any president could ever get. Nobody on God's green earth would ever think of her being president. As bad as Joe Biden is, you're like, Joe Biden, what a crazy man. Oh my God, Kamala Harris. Probably better not go that direction, right? So Trump should just go out and get whoever they hate the worst. That's who Trump should get, to make sure that they don't want anything to happen to him for fear that, like me, he should just get me as a vice president. Because then they'll be like, oh boy, we can't let this guy in. He's crazy.
Garland, I know you have to go for your show, but guys, stay tuned. And Garland, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you now that you're locked out of Twitter?
Yeah, I'm on YouTube. It's weird. My YouTube, it's really getting they've really been throttling down my YouTube page lately. Yep. I have absolute evidence of that. But I'm on YouTube and I'm on Rumble and I'm on Rockfin and on Telegram at Garland N on Telegram. So those are all the places you can find me. I'm on YouTube regularly, running off at the Yap.
Let's go. All right. Well, Garland, and everybody head over to Garland's stream. He's about to. Are you streaming or are you recording?
Streaming live with Andre Martianov. I don't know if Scott Ritter's going to stop by if he's available, but I don't know if he will be.
There you go. Go see Andre and Garland. You want to see funny? Go see Andre and Garland. Well, Garland, thank you so much, and enjoy your interview. We will probably be over there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too. Guys, I do want you to watch this video since we did make it for the show and Garland was on a time crunch, but this is Biden's his last 2 weeks.
The White House is joining the Biden campaign in pushing back against recent video clips going viral that make President Biden look as though he's confused during public events and other appearances.
Instead of talking about the president's performance in office, and what I mean by that is his legislative wins, what he's been able to do for the American people across the country, we're seeing these deep fakes, these manipulated videos.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Thanks to all the members of Congress and Homeland Security Secretary.
I can tell you that he is sharper than ever.
That's
Oh,
our guy.
God. Those are so good. The deep fakes. That's so funny
They're all
because
doing
I'm
deep
watching
fakes
it
all over.
live. I'm watching it live.
It's literally like he's right there. We actually deep faked all of those. Tell Karine that we're the best deep fake makers. Deep fakers? Is it deep fakers or deep fake makers? Do you make a deep fake or is the deep fake the action?
Yeah, well, the AI is so good now that that it's literally happening live.
Nothing is real anymore. Thank God. It's all just
Nothing
a
is real.
horrible, horrible, horrible dream. Well, guys, that was all we and the producer wanted me to remind you that he said I didn't even have to dig very deep. That was just the last 2 weeks. And he's not even American. So that's we're fucked. Anyway, so thanks so much. John, closing thoughts, please. Anything and however long as you want.
Well, it was great to have Garland on. I think that out of all of this chaos, we are going to see something better. I truly believe that. So, as fun as it is to see our president descend into a mental state of complete dilapidation, something better is coming eventually, guys. So just hang in there. And I do just want to shout out to Garland too, if he ends up seeing this, because he was one of the early voices that really helped me understand what was happening with the war in Ukraine and really provided a clear lens. So I'm so just thankful we got to have a chance to talk to him. And
Really
it was really an honor.
Really awesome. All right. Thank you, Cletus. Thank you, Christopher, for your super chats. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And make sure you go over to the Garland Nixon stream. I will be interviewing Dan Kovalik next week on his new book, The Case for Palestine. Guys, pick it up. It's really short, easy read. Totally pick it up and then give it away as a gift. It's a really good beginner's book for Palestine. So this has been another episode, and we will see you soon.